The Concorde spire floated at the intersection of 40 trade routes, a needle of white alloy piercing the velvet dark. Its halls had witnessed 1,000 ceasefires, 100 betrayals, and wars declared with the politeness of accounting errors. Commander Elias Rourke had always hated it for that reason. Violence, disguised as procedure. He stood at the center of the assembly ring, boots planted on a floor that shimmered with translated symbols. Gravity adjusted subtly for each species present, a compromise of physics and politics. Above him, holographic banners of the major powers rotated in stately silence. The Vraxian sigil flared crimson. High Executor Virex Call materialized in the center dais, his towering form encased in ceremonial armor that looked more like a shrine than protection. His multifaceted eyes swept the chamber, lingering on Rourke just long enough to register disdain. "Proceed," intoned the Concorde AI. Virex spoke, and the spire translated. "By authority of the Vraxian Dominion and in accordance with Article 17 of Galactic Stability Doctrine, this assembly is notified of the initiation of a containment war against the United Terran Systems." The words settled like dust. No gasps. No shouts. A few murmurs of interest rippled through the lesser delegations, the way spectators leaned forward when something fragile was about to break. Rourke exhaled slowly. Containment war. A neat phrase. It meant blockade, resource denial, forced compliance. If resistance continued, extinction followed as a footnote. He stepped forward before the AI could acknowledge receipt. "On what grounds?" Rourke asked. Virex's mandibles shifted, a gesture that passed for a smile among his kind. "Statistical inevitability. Your species exhibits excessive variance. Emotional volatility. Nonlinear tactical behavior. You destabilize predictive models. We trade. We cooperate. We follow the accords," Rourke said. "We've been in this chamber for 12 years without incident." "Duration does not equal safety," Virex replied. "Your history has been reviewed." Rourke knew what they'd seen. Earth's wars. Mars' secession. The Jovian insurrections. Humanity had barely survived itself before stumbling into the stars. "And what conclusion did you draw?" Rourke asked. "That you are manageable, now," Virex said. "Later, you will not be." A ripple of approval shimmered through the Vraxian delegation. Several elder species displayed polite agreement markers. It was easier to remove a variable early than adapt later. Rourke glanced at the neutral observers. The Aurelian envoy avoided his eyes. The Kith representative adjusted their translation band, suddenly fascinated by their own hands. "So that's it?" Rourke said. "No arbitration? No corrective measures?" "The corrective measure is containment," Virex answered. "Your outer colonies will be seized. Your fleets disarmed. Your population reduced to sustainable limits." Reduced. Another clean word. Rourke felt the familiar pressure behind his eyes, the anger he'd learned to leash. He tapped his wrist console once. Somewhere far from the spire, a message queued for transmission, waiting for confirmation. He tried once more. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "We don't fit your models because we don't live inside them." Virex leaned forward. "You will." The Concorde AI chimed. Declaration acknowledged. Hostilities may commence after the standard diplomatic recess. A few delegations dissolved their holograms immediately. Business concluded. Others lingered, curiosity outweighing caution. Rourke didn't move. Virex turned to disengage, then paused. "For what it is worth, Commander Rourke, your species performed better than expected." Rourke met his gaze. "That's what scares you." The Vraxian vanished. The chamber began to empty. Gravity normalized. The spire returned to its quiet hum. Rourke stood alone for a moment longer, then activated his comm. "Rourke to Terran Command," he said. "You're receiving this in real time. They've declared." A pause. Then Admiral Chen's voice, steady but tight. On what terms? Containment, Rourke replied. Full spectrum. Another pause, longer this time. Options? Rourke looked up at the banners still spinning overhead, ancient empires certain of their permanence. They think we're predictable, he said. They think we escalate rationally. They think fear makes us compliant. And? Chen asked. And they've already intercepted 3 evacuation convoys from Epsilon Indi, Rourke said. Casualties unreported. Classified as enforcement actions. Silence. Then, softly, understood. Rourke's console vibrated. A confirmation icon blinked green. Protocol black irregular authorized. He closed his eyes for a second. He remembered another chamber, years ago, another failed negotiation. Remembered the images that followed. Admiral, he said, they're not preparing for war with us. What are they preparing for? Chen asked. Rourke opened his eyes and watched the last of the delegates disappear. Compliance, he said. Which means they're about to learn the difference. The comm cut. Rourke turned toward the exit, boots echoing in the empty ring. As he walked, emergency notices began flickering along the walls, shipping lanes restricted, advisories issued, risk indexes recalculated. The galaxy was already adjusting. At the spire's outer viewport, he stopped. Beyond the transparent alloy stretched the Orion arm, stars burning with indifferent beauty. Somewhere out there, human crews were scrambling, civilians running, commanders arguing over maps that were already obsolete. Rourke placed a hand against the glass. We tried, he murmured. Behind him, the Concord AI spoke one last time, its tone unchanged. Commander Elias Rourke, it said. Do you require escort? No, Rourke replied. He straightened, shoulders squared. I know the way. He walked out of the chamber as the first Vraxian fleets began to mobilize, confident, orderly, certain. They had no idea what they had just started. The Vraxian advance began exactly on schedule. Their fleets moved in clean geometric formations, ships identical in silhouette and purpose. They secured jump points, established exclusion zones, and transmitted compliance demands with clockwork precision. To the Dominion, war was a logistical exercise, pressure applied until resistance collapsed. Humanity did none of the expected things. Commander Elias Rourke watched the first engagement reports scroll across the tactical wall of the UTS Bastion, the Terran Navy's mobile command carrier. He didn't interrupt. He let the room absorb the pattern, or rather, the absence of one. No fleet engagement, Admiral Chen said at last. They've taken 3 systems and found nothing but debris. They're finding what we left them, Rourke replied. What they should have found, Chen corrected. The room was crowded with analysts, captains, and civilian advisors pulled in from logistics, engineering, and disaster response. Not generals. Humanity had learned long ago that wars weren't won by rank alone. A censor officer raised her hand. Vraxian patrol group just lost 2 cruisers near Kestrel Belt. Chen frowned. From what? Mining drones, she said. Retrofitted. A murmur rippled through the room. Rourke stepped closer to the display. The replay showed it clearly, dozens of automated extractors, stripped of safety limiters, slamming into Vraxian hulls at relativistic speed. No warning. No formation. Just mass and velocity. They didn't even arm them, someone muttered. Rourke shook his head. They didn't need to. The Vraxians responded by tightening patrols. Then by rerouting supply convoys. Then by issuing a doctrinal update warning of civilian asset misuse. That was when the humans hit their logistics hubs. Not with fleets. With ghost ships running dark, broadcasting false transponders, carrying nothing but decoys and delayed action charges. Fuel depots vanished hours after inspections cleared them. Supply chains fractured without a single formal battle. High Executor Virex Call received the reports in silence. This contradicts engagement forecasts, one of his tacticians said, mandibles twitching. They are refusing decisive contact. They are avoiding annihilation, another offered. Call's eyes narrowed. Avoidance is irrational. It cedes territory. They abandon planets, the tactician said. Evacuate populations. Scorch infrastructure. Wasteful, Call snapped. They reduced their own capacity. He did not understand that humanity measured capacity differently. On the edge of the Karen expanse, a Vraxian battlegroup dropped out of jump space to find a silent human colony. No power signatures. No orbital defense. Sensors flagged abandoned habitats drifting out of alignment. The Vraxian commander relaxed. Then the star ignited. Not a supernova, nothing so dramatic. A controlled stellar flare triggered by months of unnoticed engineering. Radiation tore through the battlegroup before shields could compensate. Ships died without firing a shot. The message reached the Concorde spire within hours. Neutral species began reviewing human historical archives in earnest. Rourke stood in the Bastion's briefing chamber, addressing a delegation of Aurelian observers who had arrived unannounced. "You weaponize your own worlds," the Aurelian envoy asked, feathers bristling in shock. "We deny them to the enemy," Rourke replied. "There's a difference. This level of self-destruction is not sustainable." Rourke met the envoy's gaze. "Neither is extinction." Reports continued to pour in. Human forces seeded false distress calls that lured Vraxian rescue units into ambush zones. They sabotaged navigation beacons so entire squadrons misjumped into gravity wells. They hacked Dominion scheduling algorithms, causing fleets to arrive perfectly on time, to empty systems. The Vraxians began losing ships faster than projections allowed. "Casualty ratios don't make sense," a Dominion analyst said during a closed session. "They're outnumbered. Outgunned." Call listened, unmoving. "Then why are our commanders requesting withdrawals?" he asked. "Because," the analyst hesitated, "they cannot predict human responses." Fear crept in through the cracks of certainty. Back aboard the Bastion, Rourke watched intercepted Vraxian transmissions scroll past. "They're arguing," he said. "That's new." Chin folded her arms. "They're adapting." "Yes," Rourke agreed. "But they're adapting the wrong way." He pulled up a projection, human conflict history, compressed into brutal clarity. "We don't fight to win battles," he said to the room. "We fight to change the rules. Every loss teaches us something. Every mistake becomes doctrine." A junior officer frowned. "And if they learn faster?" Rourke didn't answer immediately. Outside the viewport, human ships scattered in irregular patterns, each carrying fragments of a plan no single enemy commander could see. "Then we learn what they can't," he said finally. Improvisation under pressure. The Vraxian Dominion escalated. They authorized civilian suppression. Enforced labor camps on seized worlds. Public compliance executions broadcast as warnings. The footage leaked within minutes. Human response was immediate and vicious. Independent militias struck Dominion outposts without orders. Engineers sabotaged captured infrastructure remotely. Civilian fleets rammed blockade vessels rather than surrender refugees. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion issued an unscripted communiqué. "Humanity," Virex Call declared, mandibles rigid with fury, "your actions lack honor, structure, and logic." Rourke watched the broadcast from the command deck. "Correct," he said softly. The message ended. Silence followed. Then an alert chimed, priority neutral transmission. The Kith Collective was withdrawing support from the Dominion. Not out of sympathy. Out of fear. Rourke allowed himself one breath of relief. Just one. The galaxy was beginning to understand. Humanity was not refusing to fight. They were refusing to fight the way anyone expected. And that made all the difference. The war stopped being about territory the moment the galaxy began paying attention. Commander Elias Rourke stood before the Concorde assembly again, though the chamber felt different now. The banners still rotated, the gravity still shifted politely, but the certainty had drained from the air. Delegations that once lounged in detached superiority now clustered in quiet groups, whispering, recalculating. Screens hovered above the dais, each replaying the same thing from different angles. Human footage. A Vraxian carrier drifting powerless as its own escorts disabled it to escape a collapsing supply corridor. A militia convoy detonating inside a jump gate, erasing the route behind it. Civilian evacuation ships shielding warcraft, daring the Dominion to fire first. Rourke hadn't released the footage. Independent traders had. "You have destabilized galactic order," a Vraxian elder accused, its voice trembling through the translator. "Entire doctrines are failing." Rourke didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "They were built on assumptions," he said. "Assumptions don't survive contact." Across the chamber, High Executor Virex Call stood rigid, his armor dulled by weeks of unbroken strain. His eyes fixed on the screens with something dangerously close to disbelief. "You manipulate perception," Call said. "You weaponize sympathy." "No," Rourke replied. "We weaponize truth." The Concord AI chimed softly. Casualty estimates revised. Numbers shifted. Dominion losses outpaced human projections despite overwhelming material advantage. Entire fleets reassigned to internal security. Border worlds demanding protection from a threat that refused to stay put. The Vraxian Dominion was learning the cost of certainty. Rourke's comm vibrated. Admiral Chen's voice came through, low and urgent. "Neutral coalition forming. Not against us." "Against unpredictability," Rourke said. "Against extinction," Chen corrected. The assembly erupted into debate. The Aurelian envoy stepped forward, feathers tight against his frame. "Your species sacrifices itself without hesitation. You abandon worlds. You burn assets. Why?" Rourke met his gaze. "Because survival isn't a place," he said. "It's a condition." The envoy recoiled slightly. That answer unsettled him more than any weapon. Virex Call moved then, striding to the center of the dais. "This is unsustainable," he declared. "Humanity cannot endure this pace of loss." Rourke tilted his head. "We're still here. You fracture alliances. You provoke chaos," Call continued. "Your species will exhaust itself." Rourke smiled faintly. "That assumes we're trying to win the way you define winning." Silence followed. Dangerous silence. The Concord AI broke it. Motion introduced, reclassification of the United Terran Systems. Holographic text scrolled into existence. Tier 1 existential variable. Murmurs spread like fire. Call's mandibles twitched. "Absurd," he said. "They lack the capacity for dominance." Rourke didn't argue. He didn't need to. A Kith representative floated forward, bioluminescent patterns shifting uneasily. "Dominance is irrelevant," it said. "They break projections. They infect outcomes." "Infect?" Rourke echoed. The Kith inclined its mass. "Adaptation spreads. Others will emulate." That was the moment the galaxy understood the real danger. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were teaching. The vote passed with narrow margins. The classification locked. The room felt colder. Virex Call turned to Rourke, eyes burning. "You have turned weakness into a myth," he said. "This ends now." "Agreed," Rourke replied. They faced each other in a private chamber carved from silence and light. No observers. No recordings. Just two species standing on opposite edges of history. "You could have accepted containment," Call said. "Lived. Adapted quietly." Rourke folded his hands. "You never offered living. You offered permission." Call's voice dropped. "Your people suffer." "So do yours," Rourke said. "The difference is, we expected it." Call stiffened. "You planned this. We plan for refusal, Rourke corrected. There's a difference. Outside the chamber, reports continued to arrive. Dominion governors resigning. Border fleets refusing orders. Internal security forces stretched thin by unrest they had never modeled. Call's certainty cracked. What do you want? He asked. Rourke answered without hesitation. Recognition. Autonomy. And withdrawal from our systems. And if we refuse? Rourke leaned forward. Then we keep teaching. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of futures. Call turned away, his reflection fractured across the polished walls. You are not conquerors, he said quietly. No, Rourke agreed. We're survivors. Hours later, the Dominion transmitted its first ceasefire proposal in recorded history. Conditional. Fragile. Real. When the message reached the bastion, the command deck didn't cheer. They simply breathed. Rourke stood alone at the viewport, watching stars drift past, unchanged, uncaring. Chin joined him. They'll remember this, she said. Yes, Rourke replied. So will everyone else. Was it worth it? Rourke thought of the evacuated worlds, the burned skies, the names already etched into memory. No, he said honestly. But it was necessary. Behind them, the galaxy adjusted its maps, redrawing borders not of space, but of fear. Humanity didn't rule the stars. But from that moment on, no one ever mistook them for prey again. The galaxy had learned, slowly and painfully, that humans were not predictable. But learning did not mean accepting. Recognition came grudgingly, respect grudgingly earned, and trust remained a currency few were willing to spend. Commander Elias Rourke stood once more aboard the UTS Bastion, observing a star system under human protection. The planet below was scarred, its cities hollowed and rebuilt, its rivers rerouted to mask previous settlements. Humanity's fingerprints were everywhere, but so was survival. Life persisted, stubborn and defiant. Admiral Chen approached silently. Reports from the Outer Rim, she said. Neutral species are contacting us for advisory assistance. They don't trust us, but they want instruction. Rourke didn't reply immediately. He stared at the planetary surface, remembering evacuation convoys, desperate civilians, and the quiet ingenuity that had saved them. They're beginning to understand fear, he said finally. But not the kind we feel. The kind we inspire. The comm panel chimed. An incoming transmission from the Concord Assembly. Holographic representations of the galactic powers shimmered in the room. Commander Rourke, the Aurelian envoy began, feathers trembling, your actions have destabilized the Dominion, but also the balance of trade and diplomacy. Your species is impossible to categorize. Rourke smiled faintly. That's intentional. You risk annihilation to prove it, the Kith representative added, its bioluminescence flickering nervously. The Dominion almost collapsed entirely. Almost is not failure, Rourke replied. And it's not collapse. It's a reminder. Reminders can provoke retaliation, Chen interjected. We can't afford complacency. Rourke nodded. Complacency is a luxury humanity doesn't have. We act because we must, not because we can predict the outcome. Outside the viewport, Vraxian vessels maintained a cautious distance. Their formations were fractured, their movements hesitant. Where once certainty had driven their fleets with rigid precision, now hesitation lingered in every calculation. They were learning that the universe didn't conform to a spreadsheet. Rourke turned to the communications officer. Patch me through to Virex call. No translators. Direct channel. Moments later, the Vraxian High Executor appeared, his mandibles tight, eyes unreadable. Commander Rourke, he said, voice rough with exhaustion and something that could almost be interpreted as begrudging respect, you have not only survived, you have taught. Rourke inclined his head. We didn't teach to be admired. We taught to survive. You weaponize unpredictability, Call said. Your fleets, your civilians, even your infrastructure, chaos itself follows your hand. Rourke met his gaze. Chaos is what happens when certainty is abused. You assumed control equals stability. We assumed survival equals adaptation. We were both correct. Call's eyes narrowed. And yet, the Dominion still exists. Just, Rourke said. And that is sufficient for the moment. A silence fell between them. Not the quiet of defeat, but the quiet of acknowledgement. The galaxy will remember this, Call said finally. Your species is dangerous. That's the understatement of the century, Rourke replied. The channel closed. Rourke exhaled slowly, allowing himself a brief moment of satisfaction. Not triumph, satisfaction. Victory in war was often costly. Survival, in comparison, was priceless. Chen approached. What now? Containment is off the table, Rourke said. Other species will calculate differently. Borders, protocols, fleets, they'll all change because of us. And humanity? Chen asked. Are we ready to bear that weight? Rourke looked toward the stars, the endless stretch of light and darkness. We have no choice. We've always been ready, whether the galaxy recognized it or not. A message arrived from the Terran colonies. Relief and exhaustion flowed through the transmissions. Entire systems had survived not because of superior firepower, but because humans had refused to conform to expectation. Adaptive tactics, unorthodox defenses, and improvised ingenuity had protected countless lives. Rourke reviewed the reports, noting each act of survival, each improvisation that defied prediction. Look at this, he said to Chen. Every loss has been converted into a lesson. Every mistake has strengthened us. Chen shook her head in amazement. They underestimated us at every turn. Because they can only see what fits their models, Rourke said. They cannot anticipate creativity. Outside, the human fleets moved silently, scattered yet precise, each vessel operating on individual initiative within the framework of collective survival. The Dominion had thought centralization was strength. Humanity proved that distributed adaptability was stronger. The Concord Assembly convened again, this time under pressure from multiple neutral powers. Proposals flooded in, recognition of humanity as a Tier 1 existential variable, revised protocols for interstellar engagement, new treaties ensuring autonomy. Fear had forced respect. Rourke addressed the Assembly personally via transmission. Humanity does not seek empire. We do not desire conquest. We simply exist, and we will continue to exist. We do not negotiate the right to survive. We exercise it. Across the galaxy, the words echoed. Delegations paused, advisors recalculated, and fleets adjusted. Humanity had set a precedent, survival was not passive. It was active, creative, and relentless. Hours later, Rourke walked the decks of the Bastion, observing his crew. Engineers tinkered with old vessels, turning cargo ships into defensive platforms. Pilots discussed unconventional maneuvers over comms, laughing softly at ideas that would have seemed suicidal weeks ago. Civilians on board volunteered, coordinating logistics with uncanny precision. Why do they keep doing it? A junior officer asked. Risking everything like this? Rourke smiled faintly, a wry, tired expression. Because they can. Because they refuse to submit. Because humanity's definition of survival is broader than any doctrine. The officer nodded, absorbing the weight of the words. In the observation bay, Rourke gazed out at a Vraxian fleet slowly retreating toward safe space. Not surrendering, not defeated, but wary. The Dominion had learned to respect unpredictability, and that respect was as powerful as any weapon. Chen joined him again. Do you think it will last? Nothing lasts, Rourke said. But for now, the balance has shifted. Humanity is no longer prey. The galaxy will think twice before underestimating us again. He allowed himself one final glance at the stars. Light years of distance, countless systems, civilizations beyond counting, all observing, all recalculating. Humanity had survived not by strength alone, but by ingenuity, courage, and the audacity to refuse limitation. And that, Rourke murmured, voice barely above the hum of the ship, is our legacy. The Bastion accelerated, a solitary streak of human defiance against the indifferent vastness of space. Below, planets healed, ships repaired, lives resumed, but none forgotten. Humanity had fought not just to live, but to be seen, to be feared, and to be understood. And the galaxy, for all its ancient certainty, would never mistake them for weak again.